Amongst those watching this program, there may be one of you at least who knows or strongly suspects the person responsible. If so, I'm speaking directly and personally to you. There could rest on your conscience the possible death of yet another young woman.
London in the 60s was a progressive and modern city, but underneath that there was a dark underbelly where working girls plied their trade quite openly in some cases among the streets of Soho, Bayswater, down near the river. Prostitution had never really been described as a safe profession. However, on February the 2nd, 1964, it became a lot more dangerous. Hannah Tailford, who'd been missing for 10 days, was found in the River Thames near Hammersmith Bridge. 29-year-old Hannah was a working girl, and at the time of her death was pregnant with her third child. Despite the fact that she'd been found naked in the river, with her underpants in her mouth and her stockings near her ankles, police initially thought she may have committed suicide. They didn't really take any cognizance of the fact that she was pretty short at 5'2", but this might have been quite an indicator of what was to come. On the 8th of April that year, a second body was found in the Thames at Corney Reach, Chiswick, not far from where Tailford had been found. This was Irene Lockwood, 26 years old, again a prostitute, again pregnant, and again short at 5 foot. She was also naked. 24th of April 1964, a Scottish girl, Helen Bartholomew, 22, known as Teddy. She was found dumped in a quiet alleyway just off of Brentford Road, a couple of miles away from Duke's Meadow. This was the first body that was found out with the Thames. She hadn't been submerged. She'd also been strangled. 3 of her front teeth were missing, possibly extracted after death. It was a strange, macabre signature. Bartholomew had flecks of paint on her body that indicated they'd come from the automotive industry. This was the first real clue that the police had as to where the possible suspect may have worked. It was at this point that the newspapers began to use the moniker Jack the Stripper because all the 3 bodies had been found naked. 3 days later, a confession? Kenneth Archibald walked into Notting Hill Police Station and admitted to killing Irene Lockwood. A business card from the club that Archibald run had been found in Irene Lockwood's flat. However, while he admitted to having sex with her and then taking her to a location near the river where they'd argued over money and he'd killed her and rolled her into the river, it was all circumstantial evidence. But the police in those days had one job, and that one job was to investigate and to report to the judicial system, and thereafter the judicial system would deal with it, not the police. So he went to trial at the Old Bailey for murder. He'd changed his mind by that point. He said he didn't do it, and it took the jury less than an hour to acquit him. Archibald had cast iron alibis for the other 2 murders. The police redoubled their efforts. They threw more men at it. The investigation ramped up. They were stopping and questioning people in cars. They were going round to people who were known to have frequented the working girls. They were interviewing them under the pretext of a road accident, and then when they were alone, they were questioning them. This was to spare family embarrassment, something that maybe the police should maybe think about, or maybe not, in the way that they conduct themselves these days. And then 14th of July, another murder, another Scottish girl, Mary Fleming, again a short girl, was found dead.
Well, I woke early this morning.
What time?
10 to 5. Looked out of the bedroom window and saw what I thought to be a tailor's dummy in the garage opposite.
Behind where we're standing now?
Yes. And, curiosity, I suppose, I went to have a look. Saw that it was a body of a naked girl. went back indoors and quickly phoned the police.
Again, her front teeth were missing. Again, she'd been found to have swallowed sperm. There was a suggestion that the murderer was killing these girls during violent fellatio. The same paint flecks were found on her body. This time neighbours had heard a car reversing, but no one had gone out and investigated it. The fifth victim, Margaret McGowan, was found in a car park in Horton Street, close to busy Kensington High Street, on the 25th of November 1964. She was again a working girl, but considered to be in a different league to the other girls that had been previously murdered. She was also part of the now infamous Profumo affair, where she was a witness for the defence for Stephen Ward. Again, she was short in stature, she had a tooth missing, and the familiar paint specks were on her body. She'd last been seen in October, so she may have been stored for some time. There was a further suggestion from the police that the killer may have been abusing the bodies after death. The sixth victim was found almost a year after the first murder, on the 16th of February 1965. An electrical fitter on his way to work at the Heron Industrial Estate in Acton saw bright red toenails and a foot poking out from a bunch of grass behind a unit. Instead of calling the police, he called his boss, who then turned up, and together they discovered it was a body. They then contacted the police. This was Bridget O'Hara from Dublin. Bridie had left Ireland to earn a living as a sex worker in London. She'd been missing from the 11th of January and may have been held in storage because her body had been partially mummified. This suggested it had been kept somewhere warm. Again, she had the paint specks. She had been subject to the same abuses as the other girls. The investigation. The Metropolitan Police were overwhelmed by this. They really didn't have many leads. They'd interviewed hundreds of people. They decided to put their top detective on it, Chief Superintendent John DeRose, known as 5-Day Johnny, because he had a habit of bringing unsolved, and some would say unsolvable cases, to a quick conclusion. He asked for more resources, he got them. He got the 300-strong Special Patrol Group. He got 100 extra uniform officers, he got 200 detectives. He went out, he interviewed all 7,000 people that worked on that industrial estate. He then decided to try and put the pressure on the killer. They announced through the media that they had cut the suspect list down to 20, and then a few days later down to 10, and then that they were narrowing in and were down to the last 3. At this point, they had found the suspected place where the bodies had been stored. There was an old boiler room beside the old Napier works that was abandoned, but there was a paint spraying operation across the way, and the overspray was being sucked into the abandoned or now disused building, but the boiler room was still active and still warm. DeRose summarised the profile of the victim as a sexual sadist who took pleasure in killing his victims during the act of fellatio. At this point, the woman was particularly vulnerable, giving the killer the chance to grab her head, both suffocating and strangling them at the same time. The killings had stopped, possibly due to the massive police presence, the fact that they were putting out undercover police women as, dressed as prostitutes and then questioning people that had propositioned them. The suspects. DeRose then announced that he was down to one suspect. This was a security guard on the estate whose rota seemed to fit in exactly with the deaths as they had occurred. But before they could go and arrest him and question him, that suspect took his own life. The name of that suspect was never released at the time because obviously he had never really been formally charged, and until proven guilty, he was innocent. Although his name has since come out as Mungo Ireland, a Dundee man who had taken up residence in London. He had 5 kids. He was happily married. He had been involved in a minor road traffic, well, I say minor, but it was a hit and run in effect, and he was due to go to court quite soon, just before he committed suicide. Was this just a big stretch? Because on examination of his property, on searching his premises, nothing was ever found to tie him to the murders, other than the fact that he was a security guard at the industrial estate where the last victim was found. His work records also indicated on the night that Bridie O'Hara disappeared, he was in Scotland. A reformed gangster called Jimmy Tippett Jr. claimed during his research for his book that he was writing about London's gangland, he uncovered information suggesting that British light heavyweight boxing champion Freddie Mills was responsible for the murders. Freddie does have a resemblance to the identikit picture. Having said that, identikit pictures were in their infancy at this time. Apparently, it was common knowledge in the seedy underbelly of gangland London that Freddie Mills was a bit of a sexual deviant, and a lot of people assumed that it was him that was doing it. Freddie Mills, again, was found dead in a car this time with a rifle between his legs and a gunshot wound to his head. It was possibly murder set to look like suicide. It was possibly suicide. Was it a policeman? It has been suggested that a former Metropolitan Police detective was suspected, and in the opinion of several senior detectives investigating the case, they'd previously raised suspicions about this unnamed officer's involvement in a series of articles published by the Sun newspaper in 1972. We don't know this man's name. He was only ever referred to by researchers as the cop. I'm going to throw my hat in the ring here and give you something to think about. Scotland Yard's finest Chief Superintendent John DeRose, nicknamed the suspect that he never found Big John. What if it was him? He would be ideally placed. The bodies were all found in different police subdivisions. The person that moved around may have had intimate knowledge of how the police worked, where they did the patrols, how often they were in certain places. Could Chief Superintendent John DeRose have been Jack the Stripper? It's maybe a wild one, but is it worth considering? Another police superintendent was Tommy Butler of the Metropolitan Police's famous flying squad, who was alleged may have been Jack the Stripper. He died in 1970. Our last suspect is Harold Jones of Abertilly. He was a 15-year-old boy working in Mortimer's stores. On the 5th of February 1921, Frida Burnell was reported missing by her parents after her father had sent her to Mortimer's stores in order to get chicken grit and chicken feed. When questioned by the police, Harold said that she had indeed been in the store at 9:05 and he'd given her chicken feed, but he hadn't been able to give her grit because they only had loose grit at the store, and that she had gone home alone to ask her father if that would suffice. The following morning, Frida's body was found concealed in a sack only 300 yards from Mortimer's store. Her cause of death was a combination of blunt trauma and strangulation. she still had the ligature tied around her neck. The time of death was put at between 9:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. the previous day. In addition, she'd been gagged, her elbows had been bound, and her ankles were tied together. An attempt had been made to sexually assault the child. When Mortimer's store was searched, a handkerchief that belonged to the girl was found within it, as well as a concealed axe handle, which looked like the one that had been used to cause the blunt trauma on the child. Other than the owner of the store, Jones was the only other individual in possession of a key, and it was established that no one had actually seen him in the shop between 9:15 and 9:40 a.m. the previous day. Jones was brought to trial. His employer, Herbert Mortimer, provided him with an alibi, insisting he had heard Jones and his own son working in the store in the early morning of 5th of February, before the two had been sent to deliver a sack of potatoes to a customer at approximately 10 a.m, then returned to the shop where he worked all day. Despite the circumstantial evidence, the fact that the girl appeared to have been within the shed, was possibly killed within the shed, had corn grits all over her, was in a corn sack, the jury found Jones not guilty and acquitted him. He walked free from the courtroom, and when he returned to Abertilly, it was in a charabanc adorned with flags and bunting, to cheers from the local public, most of whom found the notion that a 15-year-old boy could sexually assault and kill a child simply inconceivable. One of those to greet Jones upon his return was a neighbour named George Little, who greeted him with his statement, "Well done, lad. We knew you didn't do it." 17 days later, George Little informed the police that his daughter Florence was missing. The next day, the police searched Harold Jones's home at 8:30. They noticed the trapdoor to the attic was bloodstained, despite having had evident attempts to clean it. They entered the attic and they discovered Florence's body among the rafters. The trial of Harold Jones began on the 1st of November 1921. Less than an hour later, he was guilty and sentenced to be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. As a result of him being under 16 at the time of conviction, he could not be considered for any form of capital punishment. Jones served 20 years of his life imprisonment. Against the recommendations of a psychiatrist, he was released on the 6th of December 1941 at age 35. He joined the Merchant Navy. After the Second World War, he resided briefly in Newport and then relocated to Fulham, London, where he went under the alias Harry Stevens. He later married and fathered a child. Harry Jones stayed less than 2 or 3 streets away from a couple of the victims. He was never questioned by the Metropolitan Police as to any possible involvement in these crimes. He died in 1971. 2 other girls had been associated with this murderer. Elizabeth Figg was found dead at 5:10 on the 17th of June 1959 in Duke's Meadows. She was sitting up against a tree. Her dress had been ripped open. Her underwear was missing. She had been strangled. Gwyneth Rees was another girl that had been unfortunately murdered. She was found on 8th of November 1963 at Barnesborough Council refuse disposal site, where unfortunately she'd been decapitated by a workman's spade and a digger as she'd been under rubbish that had been being flattened. She'd been there for some time. There's no conclusive evidence to link these two to the Jack the Stripper murders, although many people have. Conclusion. So who murdered these girls? What do the police say? Well, the police have closed the case. After the death of the security guard, the case was never really formally investigated until it was reopened, I think, in the middle 2000s, 2006 or something like that. And nothing really was... The people that investigated that had a strong opinion that Harold Jones may have been guilty. Anything else is just speculation. Everything's actually speculation at this point because there's no forensic evidence, there's nothing retained, there's very little to go on. It was before DNA. There's very little chance of ever finding out who did this unless they would come forward and confess, and it's likely that they're now dead. Like Jack the Ripper before it, Jack the Stripper remains unsolved and unknown.